Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to episode 18 of the Art of Procurement show. And I really can't believe that we're already at number 18, so it's been a fantastic start. Another first for the Art of Procurement today. I'm actually going to have two guests on the show. So the guests are Alun Rafique and Ni, both of Market Dojo. If you haven't heard of Market Dojo before, they're a niche technology provider in the procurement space who provide eAuction, primarily eAuction technology. As you're going to hear in the show, I've actually long been a skeptic of these types of eAuction tools because all too often, I've had experience of them being used in the wrong way. So I invited Alun and Ni onto the show to really help me understand how these tools should be used, what's best practices in using them when they shouldn't be used, and maybe how you can get the most out of them. Because I know that these tools are used successfully every single day, and I think that some of my bad experiences very early on in the use of these tools has probably shaped some of my thoughts. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to learn, straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, in how these tools should be used and can be used. Before I go into the show, I do want to let you know that I recently published a new report, and it's called The 21 Tips to Help You Secure Your Dream Professional Job. The report is a summary of the tips and tricks that cover the entire job search process. And I compiled it by, from using Art of Procurement interviews with recruitment consultants and also just other research that I've undertaken into the procurement recruitment process. So to get a copy of the report, you can just go to artofprocurement.com/21tips. That's artofprocurement.com/21tips. Okay, well, let's get on with the show. Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's show. So, as I mentioned just before the music, my guests today are Alun Rafique and Ni Drewe from Market Dojo. So, Alun, Ni, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Hi.
Welcome. Hi. Thank you.
So, before we start, I'd just like for you both to provide a quick introduction so that the Art of Procurement listeners can just get to know you a little bit. Alun, I don't know if you want the honor of going first.
I'll give it a go. So, my name's Alun Rafique. My background's as an aeronautical engineer. Worked for Rolls-Royce for a number of years on the military side in Bristol. And as a lot of people, I fell into procurement. I like the mix of the commercial, the social, the technical skills. And from there, I went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in London for a number of years. I was actually on a project with the MOD at Boscombe Down on a tri-service inventory system. And then I took a bit of a different direction and moved into kind of sales of simulation software, engineering simulation software. So anything from fluid dynamics and finite element analysis to vibroacoustics in a raft of industries. Looking at really cool things like airflows over Formula One cars to airflows over missiles, and then ended up working for a boutique consultancy, coming background to what I thought at the time was the love of my life, and selling managed auctions, where I was very fortunate to meet Ni.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, massive opinion. So myself, Ni Drewe, I am a mechanical engineer by background. That was my degree. And likewise, I kind of fell into procurement as well. When I left university, I always had a passion for management consultancy and sort of getting to grips with why businesses are working, or more importantly, why they're not working, and trying to come up with solutions to that. And worked for this boutique consultancy, focusing mainly on supply chain, and got into managed reverse auctions, which was a very enjoyable piece of work, kind of taking clients' requirements and packaging up their contract terms and service levels and all the product and service definition, finding suppliers that were suitable for their needs, qualifying those suppliers, and just generally managing the whole auction process for them before handing back what tended to be some very, very successful results. It was kind of towards the end of that Alan and I went our separate ways before coming back together again and partnering up to set up Market Dojo.
And so I guess you enjoyed the auction side enough that you wanted to set your own company up around it.
Absolutely, yeah. It just drove some very quick and transparent results for our clients. Mm-hmm. But Market Dojo, the real philosophy and driver behind that was that during our time as consultants, getting these wonderful results, our clients were kind of increasingly asking to have more of a go of these things themselves. They kind of learned from us a little bit, a bit of skills transfer there, and felt that perhaps they were in a good position to try their own. However, the tools around at that time, we're talking about sort of 2010-ish area, the tools were still fairly legacy. They were developed in the mid-90s, a lot of them. They weren't very user-friendly. They were primarily created on the back of a service, not self-service. And so we thought there was a bit of a gap in the market there to come up with some very intuitive, modern tools that would help clients run these auctions themselves and deliver the results for themselves. And that was our kind of philosophy at Dojo, really.
And so really the premise for the conversation today is, I've always been somewhat skeptical about the value of eAuctions. And I think that goes back to, early in my career in the automotive industry, and I'm thinking around the turn of the century, there was really a big effort then to use eAuction software, certainly within my employer, at any cost. And I think that was particularly true in automotive because there was a lot of investment within the automotive companies in procurement technology at the time. And so we had to use it at all costs. And so I found that really more often than not, it was used in places that it shouldn't be used and had probably the opposite result of what was desired. And the process was a mess. Now, on the other hand, I know that eAuctions are being used on a daily basis very successfully. And so I'm really just interested to understand kind of what that should look like, what the options are for professionals thinking about using eAuctions, when it's an important part of the toolbox to use, and some of the critical success factors. So that's really what I'm hoping to talk about today. And, first of all, I'd just like to ask a pretty basic question, and that's, what is an eAuction? What do you think of when you think of an eAuction?
Yeah, okay. I mean, an eAuction is, as everyone, most people normally know eAuctions as eBay or the like, or auction houses, where you have something you're trying to sell and people bid for it and the price goes up. And in the auctions, most people know there's a leading bid, and you need to beat the leading bid for the auctioneer to accept your bid, and then the auction goes on. And that's an auction. It's what's called, in our terms, a forward auction, where you're trying to sell something. And it's also, another term for it would be an open auction, for example, where you're looking at the leading bid and you need to beat that. In the procurement landscape, it's none really too different, apart from we call it a reverse auction, where the price goes down. So, for example, you want to buy something, let's say a table for £100, and then suppliers will give you a price to supply you with that table. So one supplier might go £90, another might supply £80, and hence the price goes down. You have different types of auction in the space. So you might have a ranked auction where the supplier will see their position and the price. You might have an open auction where they have to beat the lead bid. You can even have a Japanese auction where the price decreases over time, and the supplier needs to say whether they're in or whether they're out. There's cute little things you have in there, like auto extensions, which let the auction extend if a bid's placed in the last final minutes, and that prevents the thing called sniping, for example, that you get in eBay. You could have weighted tenders where your rank is based on your price and non-price criteria, and there's, in all fairness, there's a multitude of other things. Right. But in its essence, in the procurement space, it's just reverse auction is a negotiation tool, and maybe Nick can talk a bit about why you might use some of these particular auctions, for example.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I was going to say I'm very interested in when you take a step back and look at whether it's a ranked auction, an open auction, or a Japanese, which I think are three that Alan mentioned. What are the pros and cons, and kind of what would need to be present for you to use each one? How do you decide which one to use?
Well, the type of auction to use, we would normally recommend to our clients of don't make that decision until you've understood the market and the particular goods or services you're tendering. Normally, that decision can be made after you've received initial bids from your suppliers. So, you've packaged up your requirement, you've gone out to market, you've qualified some suppliers, you've vetted that they can fit your needs, and you've asked for them to give you some initial offers. Once you have those offers, that is typically when we would recommend to start looking at your auction strategy and which type of auction would be best to fit for that need. So, for example, if you end up you're in a situation where you don't care which supplier wins because, quite frankly, they can all do the job for you.
Yeah.
It's a real commodity, for example. You could run an open auction because, quite frankly, all you're concerned about is price. You're just saying, look, give me the best price possible. The auction's going to tell you what the best price is. You just have to compete against it. And that's really effective just to drive down the price, get to where you want to be. Suppliers know exactly what they need to beat. And it's a sort of efficient way of doing that. The drawbacks to it are perhaps that, certain suppliers, they might look at that leading bid and think, I can't compete with that. And they will pull out of the process early, when in fact they could have perhaps dropped their price by a small amount and at least got quite close to that leading bid, if not beating it. So that then reduces the availability and the sort of the number of suppliers you could potentially award business to. If you didn't want to award to the first place supplier because, for example, they haven't got the greatest reputation, or perhaps have misunderstood something and they can't actually work with you, you would then typically award to supplier in position 2, the next best supplier. And in an open auction, that they may not have a very sort of closely packed price. Right. Conversely, the ranked auction is very suitable for that because suppliers will be told just what their ranking is, first, second, third, fourth. And if a supplier is in second place, they will just incrementally reduce their offer until they try and hit first place. And so you get what we call price compression, where you get typically 3 or 4 suppliers who are very, very close together on price, all up the sort of the top end, the competitive end of the auction. And so after the auction, you've got a bit of a choice as to which supplier you might wish to go with. And on the choice note, it's worth noting that typically our auctions are run on buyer's choice, which means you're not obliged to award business to the first place supplier. You can award to second, third, fourth, whoever you choose, because you might have a good reason for doing so. As I say, there are maybe other qualitative aspects that the auction may not have taken into account up front that you may wish to place your award decision on. So ranked is very good for that.
Sorry, Nick, the price really is just one of the factors that will be taken into consideration when making the sourcing award.
Absolutely, yes. And so long as you're clear about that during the tender process and indeed the auction process, then that's all fair. You can do a different type of auction, which is a weighted auction in our tool, where you do actually grade the suppliers on the non-price aspects, the qualitative aspects, and that gets included as part of their commercial offer to give kind of the ranking of on their overall proposition. So if someone is bidding based on providing you a Lamborghini type service, but at a very high price, and another supplier is offering you, a Ford Mondeo type proposition at a very low price, you can still put them in the same auction together because those two things are equaled out as part of the weighting.
Do they get to see that? So it's not just something on the buyer side who can evaluate in real time. The suppliers themselves know that that's how they stack up against the other participants in the auction.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's one of the grants we were awarded was And it comes back to one of the points of saying that Market Dojo is around user adoption of the software that maybe we can discuss a bit later in terms of how do you get people from the buyer and supplier side using the software. One of the grants we had was to make complex things like weighted tenders more accessible to a wider audience by making it easier from the buyer and the supplier side, by making the things like weighted comparisons all very linear and logical, so the buyer can understand what's going on from his setup, and the supplier can understand that, you know, when they see their rank on their screen, it's a weighted rank rather than a rank just based on price, with all this jiggery-pokery going on outside the system. It's all contained within the system and all nice and easy to understand. I think that's a key point of bringing eAuctions to a wider audience. Yeah,
and there was something that Nick mentioned that I just wanted to touch on, and that was a recommendation that, you know, you validated the suppliers who go in to the auction, so you know that they're capable of providing what it is that you're asking them for, but that you go to the market first, get some initial offers before you go to the tool. So I guess my questions are are you upfront with the suppliers when you go out to them initially to say this is how the process is going to work? You know, we're validating you before them pushing it into an auction, and even if you do or you don't, how do suppliers react to an offline process then being taken online?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said around that. I mean, in terms of the suppliers, you do need to be. An auction is not an excuse for not picking up the phone. Mm-hmm. You know, if it's the first time these suppliers have been involved in the process, you do need to be upfront, honest, and open with them, and you get more engagement. And some research by the University of West of England have shown that the eAuctions is actually create stronger relationships in the long run, because of if an auction is approached in a professional way with good specifications and liquidity, then it generates kind of a confidence with the suppliers. And so for sure that you need to have that kind of upfront work and dealings with them. Now, whether you audit the suppliers before or after the auction, for example, that might depend on what it is you're tendering. You might, for example, say, you want suppliers in this auction who definitely can be a supplier of ours, or perhaps you might run the auction with a large supplier base more speculatively, with suppliers that you believe are capable and seem to be able to meet your SLAs, for example, but afterwards you might audit the top three. There's other things that we can go into on buyer's choice. I think one of the key things to mention as well is that, you know, we, as a self-service platform, one of the key things that we initially have to overcome is the reticence for buyers to kind of run these events. And so we have things in the process to manage that, such as tracking the suppliers to let you know whether they've received the invitation, whether they've accepted it, and another process called qualification bids or pre-bids. So before the auction actually starts, you've received these pre-bids from the suppliers. So let's say you run this on your own without any consultants to help you there. These pre-bids let you know whether the supplier can use the software, whether they can log in, whether they can put bids in, whether they've understood your specification, whether you've got any initial savings, whether your strategy, as Nick mentioned, will work, what type of auction should be run. So before you actually get to the auction, you should be in a position to understand if everyone is going to be able to bid and if your auction is going to be a success. So thereby, via this process, and it's self-service, so we've got to be quite slick about it. So before you get to an auction, you know whether it's going to be a success or not. So again, you're mitigating that risk.
That's very fair. I just one extra point on that was just it's important to be fair. And you don't want to invite suppliers that do not stand a chance of winning the business, or that you're going to rule them out immediately. We've read before that there's a statistic that out of the auctions, 60% of them, the business ends up being awarded to the incumbent anyway. Yeah. Which isn't a particularly favourable statistic for auctions. But then again, I don't know the statistic for what a general paper-based or email-based RFP.
I would say it's close. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that number, and I think that an awful lot of RFPs paper-based probably have the same outcome too.
Okay, I'd suspect the same. And so, you're going to put your suppliers through this process. Be clear what you expect, be clear how you're going to run it, and be clear that they do stand an equitable chance of winning it, because you don't want to waste anyone's time, quite frankly.
And another interesting thing on that is myself and Nick, we often lecture at universities, and we're at one the other day, and the lecturer said that when he does all his marking online, and when he finds his marking online rather than a paper base, I'm just going to give you a score and give it back, he actually gets more, not criticism so much, but more of a discussion with the students on the marking, and it becomes much more challenging. And interestingly, we're drawing the parallel to eAuctions, is, you run an auction, you're much more open, honest, transparent, you get more feedback, you get more benefit for the supplier, and yet sometimes the suppliers are maybe less happy to take part or less happy with the result if they don't win it because of the feedback that they receive. However, what a lot of them, I believe, kind of fail to look at sometimes is, well, what's the alternative, which is typically a paper-based process, which you fill out, send in, and don't hear anything back from. And that's sometimes happier, but by not knowing. And so,
at least there's a built-in feedback loop.
Yeah, absolutely. Suppliers actually can get, if they're run sensibly in terms of within a company, not all the time, for example, used as and when as a negotiation tool, suppliers get a lot of benefit from in terms of transparency, in terms of low sales costs, auditability of their bidding as well, and this feedback. If they're smart about the way they bid, they can not only impress the client by how they bid, because there might be a room full of stakeholders, but also they can get a lot of feedback from themselves around this. And so suppliers are starting to learn actually it's a really good tool.
Yeah, and they also get invited to opportunities they may not otherwise have been invited to. If you were alternatively going to run an RFP, you might think, well, I'll just throw it out to the 3 suppliers I know and pick one of them. But if you go out to auction, your natural inclination is to think competition. And if you think competition, you think, well, who else can we get involved in this process? And you might throw the door open a bit wider, get some new suppliers in there that you've been willing to trial, to assess for some time, and think, well, come on, guys, now's your opportunity. Show me, prove it to me. And they get invited to these opportunities through the auction.
So when we start thinking about what categories lend themselves or what characteristics lend themselves to something being placed through any auction, are there things that absolutely you recommend people don't put through any auction? And then on the flip side, what things have to be there for an auction to be successful?
Yeah, I think it's a very it's a very interesting conversation, that side of things, because there are the obvious categories which are perceived to be suitable for an auction. Mm-hmm. But in all fairness, I don't think I'd rule in or rule out. I don't think we'd rule in or rule out any particular category. I think what you've got to do, as Nick mentioned at the beginning, is look at every category for kind of like on a fair basis. It's like the supplier base. You've got to look at the category and understand, can I define it? Can I define the SLAs? Can I define terms and conditions? Can I determine the payment terms? Have I got a supplier base who is interested in competing? If, for example, it might be a bit woolly, like some suppliers might do 30-day payment terms, some might do 45 payment terms. It doesn't mean you can't run an auction. It just means you might have to look at a weighted auction. So you score these different elements in different ways. So, you've got the obvious ones like office supplies. And we've had examples where clients have run an auction that pay £500 for an auction, run an auction on £1 million worth of stationery and save themselves 60%. And that was actually thinking about a large consultancy who had other tools in house but needed that user adoption that we helped them with. But we've had other clients, for example, who've run quite a number of £1 million worth of management consultancy, a real kind of service that you'd think, I don't think you can do that, but they did do it very successfully because of the way they approached it.
Yeah, absolutely. And other examples have been things like aircraft carriers.
Right.
We've seen that. Pet food, drugs, hospital drugs. We had an auction 2 years ago, something fun. It was called a pig launcher, which images of Angry Birds came to mind when we heard about the pig launcher. But Sadly, it wasn't. It was something to clear oil and gas pipelines or something. I can't quite remember now. But we've even seen eAuctions for eAuction software. So, you might think, oh, stationery, I'll auction it. Packaging, I'll auction it. But what we'd recommend is, no, don't think of it as a commodity. Think of it as, a normal tender. Just go out to market, run it as a normal tender, and just leave the option open that an auction may be used to do the final negotiation. And based on what comes out of that tender, if you've got a number of suppliers who are interested, they're all capable, they've understood specifications well, they're bidding on equal terms kind of thing, although, weighted auctions, as I say, can help overcome that anyhow. And you've got a good number of suppliers in there and things like this, then you can push forward with an auction. So it's kind of detaching yourself in some ways from the commodity and actually looking at the characteristics of your tender itself.
Right.
And also you have things like buyer's choice clauses. So let's say there are some fluffy things you need to discuss. Well, you have the auction negotiate the price, and then you have a buyer's choice clause, which is basically saying, hey, we're going to look most favourably on those in first position, but however, we'll bring the top three in for a discussion around X, Y, Z. So the suppliers can feel that, even though there's going to be a quite a heavy price negotiation, perhaps they're still going to get the opportunity to present and discuss about all the extra things that they can do for you. One of our second grants, actually, for innovation was around, we developed a little tool, Market Dojo, to help with this kind of exercise, and it's not rocket science. It's just about, as Nick mentioned, looking at the whether you can define it, looking at whether you've got the liquidity, and then making that judgment on whether it's going to be an ERFI, a Japanese auction, or a normal auction, for example.
Yeah, one of the things that I was interested in asking is kind of understanding some critical success factors to make sure that you get from an eAuction what you hope to get out of it. And then when you were talking about areas that could lend themselves to an eAuction and thinking, don't rule out anything by category. It depends on what's present, what the characteristics are present for each thing that you're trying to buy. And you mentioned management consulting. Services are something which I think, in my mind, I've always struggled a little bit more with how you put services through an eAuction tool. So I'm really interested if you could just walk through kind of critical success factors, but maybe apply them to a service-based example like consulting, where maybe the scope isn't as well defined as it is if you're buying stationery.
I had a discussion the other day with someone who, it was kind of along these lines of services and how you can negotiate on them. And I remember when I was a consultant and I was sitting in front of a big team of people who were very skeptical about their particular commodity being auctioned. In this case, it was for freight. It was for delivering newspapers around the nation. And one of their concerns was, well, look, the freight operator we work with at the moment, they do a fantastic service. They know all the people in the street by person. They know exactly where to deliver all the newspapers. They even leave notes to the owners of the newspaper, a nice little personal touch. And one of our kind of things was, okay, well, is this defined in your contract and the service level? And well, no, it's not. It's just something that they do in addition. And it's like, okay, well, how much do you think you're being charged for this sort of extra service? And they're like, oh, no, we don't get charged anything for it. They do it as just a free bonus. And, we ran the auction. We managed to sort of convince them on that side, because the idea being, okay, if that is an important service level for you, let's put it into the contract. Any new freight provider, they're being expected to deliver handwritten notes to the recipient, and to leave the newspaper behind the hedge of Mrs. Jones at number 49, and so on. Detail it out on paper so that other suppliers know that that's what's expected for them. And we ran the auction, and lo and behold, other suppliers came in some 40-odd% cheaper.
Wow. And
so we were able to go back to the guys and say, look, you do see how, that so-called free service you were getting is actually costing you 40% year on year. And, in some cases, they've been with these suppliers for like 10 odd years. Mm-hmm. And this equates to millions. And that's one real thing about the auction. It does reveal the transparency of what the real market price is. And so, coming back to the services side of things, it's just a case of writing down what you think a good source of supply looks like and a good service level looks like. So if it's management consulting, it's like, what level of person do you need? Is it partner? Is it a senior associate, a junior associate? What does a good CV look like for them? What kind of work experience do you need them to see? What kind of clients and industries must they have worked in? Mm-hmm. And for how long? We're talking about 1 year, 10 year, 15 year, and so on. And this is the important bit of the whole thing, of just defining what service you expect, making sure that the suppliers you invite can fulfill that service, and then, quite frankly, you're down to price. That's the last piece of the negotiation puzzle. So that would be my recommendation on this side of things.
Yeah, and if you get one of the interesting things I learned once on the course, it was this gentleman, and it was an if clause, and he had this basically child stuck up a tree, his child, and the child, I can't get down, and he basically said, well, if you were going to get down, how can you get down? No, I can't get down, I can't do it, but if you were, how would you do it? And I can't do it, I can't get down. And this conversation went on. Eventually the little girl said, well, if I put my foot there and I put my foot there, I might be able to, and next thing, she's down from the tree. And interestingly, if you're faced with a stakeholder who's going, no, you can't do my category is too important, you can't possibly put that through in the auction. And bear in mind, in the auction, it's just a negotiation, just part of the process. Yeah. It's like, well, ask them, well, if you were going to do it, how would you do it? Get the stakeholders to think about what the objections are. Like Nick mentioned, they go, well, you need this. You write it down and go, well, if we satisfy all of this, it's like almost a sales process. Would you then be able to take this to a tender? No, well, if you did all of that, then yes, okay, you could negotiate the price in the auction if it's a price-only auction. So exactly as Nick mentioned, you just have to be able to think about what's important, nail it all down, and also there's other things such as making sure the suppliers that are involved are all treated in the same way, and they're bidding like for like, and you have enough suppliers in there to make the auction a success, especially if it's a ranked event and you need that interaction. And you need to encourage the adoption from the buyer and the supplier side. That's where we focus in a lot, and to make it easy. So the software's not an issue. It's nice and easy to use, which is the key for a lot of software on the market. And I think a lot of softwares on the market in the past, like large ERP systems, for example, they're great systems. However, they bring the benefits to the management, and that's why they're normally implemented, but not necessarily bringing the benefits to the end user, which is what you need for adoption and the correct use of the system to get the real benefits. And so we focus on that, the bringing the benefits to all parts of the organization, benefits to the supplier through the good interface, and that helps with the adoption. We've had auctions run before with taxi drivers bidding, in particular freight routes for a council, and doing the qualification bid process. So by the time you get to the auction, you're confident that it is going to work, or perhaps you say it's not going to work. So I think those are the key things to really think about.
So it's really making sure that it's definable. So what you want is definable. So long as that's present, you can really push anything through a tool, and it's really then the upfront preparation, the structure of the auction, that defines whether what is definable then leads to a successful outcome in the auction itself. It sounds like those are really the key, the two keys at least. I know there's a heck of a lot more done into it than that, but so long as that's present, you're really going to maximize your chances of success in an auction.
Absolutely, and a couple of points further to that is if you've put that extra work in, and sometimes that's the barrier to e-auctions because there's a bit of extra work to do, but it makes the negotiation faster, makes the implementation faster. We started off there and we developed a fully sourcing tool now to deal with like multi-criteria evaluation questionnaires, RFQs, and e-auctions. And I think another benefit of e-sourcing is general, because you can get drawn into the e-auction element, is just that time saving. So the ability to negotiate, whether it's an RFX or an e-auction, with more suppliers in a more auditable way without the extra overhead. I mean, another discussion entirely is our biggest competitor at the moment is probably email, because a lot of people run tenders through email, but in our view it's kind of crazy, because a salesperson will use a CRM system, but a procurement person will still use their email. No auditability, no traceability, someone's away, what's going on. And with an e-sourcing system, you go out to more suppliers. All the messaging is in one format, all the pricing's in one format. So e-sourcing in general is just a massive efficiency kind of increase in auditable method. And I think the things you mentioned to make the auction a success actually apply to many of the areas of procurement in reality.
Yeah. So I'm mindful that we're running up against time here. There's actually a bunch more things that I would love to explore. I think maybe would even be could be the focus of another show, and talking specifically about tactics of how you actually execute right from the beginning all the way through to the end of an auction, because those are really key in terms of getting the success that you want. But I just want to, as a wrap-up, ask where listeners can contact you if they'd like to continue the conversation with you both.
That would be wonderful if people would like to. We can be found very availably on the website, so www.marketdojo.com. Myself, Nick Drewe, or Alun Rafique, you can reach us over the phone. Our switchboard is 0044 for UK, 117-230-9200. Otherwise, you can hit us on Skype. We're a very open and accessible company, so we've got marketdojo.nick or marketdojo.alun. Alun with a U. Yep. I believe Alun is a Welsh pedigree there. Finally, our emails, Alun with a U .Rafique, R-A-F for Freddie, I-Q-U-E, @marketdojo.com, or Nick, N-I-C-K, Drewe, D-R-E-W-E, @marketdojo.com as well. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to include links to all the contact details in the show notes today, along with a summary of the discussion points that we talked at. That's going to be at artofprocurement.com/eAuction. That's all one word for eAuction. I think this is a great kind of primer into where you can, where you can't use eAuctions, and, really opened my mind to thinking that eAuctions can be suitable for everything. You just have to make sure that the circumstances are right, and that you're able to define the service that you want, and that you need to put the preparation in up front to actually get the results that you need. And so obviously I'd love to talk about this in a little bit more detail in future, but for today, I just want to thank you both, Alun and Nick, for your time, and I'm sure that we will talk again on the show soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Phil, and likewise, we'd love to come back and chat some more. We can talk all day about
awesome.
eAuctions. It's something we love, a lot of passion here. So, thank you.